I am Marcus Dixon with Gold Derby, and we would like to welcome back to our film composers Oscar shortlist panel, Volker Bertelmann for All Quiet on the Western Front, Simon Franglen for Avatar: The Way of Water, and Nathan Johnson for Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. And gentlemen, I would love to get the ball rolling with finding out from each of you what film score growing up made such an impression on you that you decided this is what I want to do with my life. Is there one or two that you want to name drop? For me, I think Jurassic Park 1993, John Williams was such an epic score. I bought the cassette and I would listen to it over and over and over. So Volker, let's start with you.
Well, when I was born in a German countryside, but there was the best cinema that was always voted for the best cinema in Germany. And so when I was a kid, I went there a lot of times. And my first film actually that had impressive music in there was Indiana Jones, that I saw, the very first one. And as a kid, I was completely impressed by that, and I wanted to, make more and listen more and more to film music from that time onwards.
And Chris Beecham, who's watching us here, that's his favorite movie of all time. What about you, Simon?
I'll go with two. There's a Battle of Britain, which it has in. William Walton wrote this amazing scene. They're called The Battle in the Air, and it's a music montage, and it was just astonishing. It's an astounding piece of music. It didn't do the whole score, but that one just brought me in because the music drove you through this 6 or 7 minute sequence. And then the other one, being that I'm a synthesist, then it has to be Blade Runner. The original Blade Runner is one of those scores that you go, not only am I not worthy, but I just could bathe in this. I thought that what Vangelis did, and he managed to create a world sonically that was unlike anything else that was out there at the time. And I think that is the mark of true greatness.
And Nathan?
Two jump to mind for me as well. I think The Mission by Morricone was something that I remember being young and feeling music jump off a screen in a way that I hadn't noticed perhaps before. But the other one was a deep cut for John Williams. Ryan and I had a Hook CD when we were kids, and that was kind of what we used to edit into all of our homemade family movies. So I feel like in that way, John Williams very much scored our childhood.
I have argued with people about whether Hook is a good movie or a bad movie. I think it's phenomenal. So there you go. Do you all have a favorite genre of music to write for? Or conversely, is there a genre you haven't yet written for that you're just itching to do it someday? Maybe Simon, we'll start with you.
A noir. I would love to do a noir. I mean, there's, talking of films you love, there is Touch of Evil, with Henry Mancini's score there, which is an astonishing work with Johnny Williams playing piano. But I would love to do a noir.
Nathan?
I think the main thing I want to do is a musical. And I kind of come from a songwriting background, but Ryan and I have talked about doing a musical together for a long time. And that is definitely on our to-do list.
I could see Knives Out 3 being a musical.
It probably won't be in the Knives Out world, but that would be ridiculous.
And Volker, what about you?
Well, I would love to work maybe on an animation movie that I haven't done yet. But at the same time, I love actually challenges. Mostly when I'm getting asked for something where I'm getting afraid, I rather say yes and just hiding for a couple of days, and then I'm trying to get back to the challenge, because I think I feel the life on Earth is actually therefore to grow, like as a person, but also as a musician, and I think when you always do the same thing, you get a little bit stuck. So I love actually to get more challenges, hopefully.
And all of your movies were made, during the COVID pandemic. And I'm curious, since you work with so many, dozens, if not hundreds of musicians and technicians on a day-to-day basis, how did your productions, how were they affected by the pandemic? Simon, how about you?
I think it's fair to say that I lived severance for 6 months. And I wish I was kidding. I went down to New Zealand on January the 6th, and we built an ad hoc studio down the hall from Jim Cameron so that I could work there. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, he would just, wander down and we would talk and we would work, and it was great. And then New Zealand went into an orange alert. And to keep the production going, we all went into work bubbles. And those bubbles, in my case, were 3 other people. And Jim would be the other side of the door in his editorial bubble. And there, I stayed in those bubbles for 5 or 6 months. And I would get up in the morning, I would cycle around the bay to my studio, I would work, and I would cycle home, and I would get in the elevator and go upstairs and go to sleep, and then repeat the next day. And we had this weird situation where sometimes Jim and I would be collaborating on Zoom. I could hear him through the door, and then half a second later, I could hear him through the Zoom because there would be a time lag. And so I think then obviously the thing that we all suffered from, which is that orchestras have to socially distance, we have to separate all our sections. I think that I'm astonished, I think it's been tough for us all, but I think I'm very glad we're coming out of this.
Oh yeah, me too. Volker, what about you?
Well, I recorded in London at Air Studio with the LCO, with the London Contemporary Orchestra, and I really loved, working with them because I had the feeling they were the right guys to do a lot of glissandos and weird pitch stuff that sometimes with other orchestras maybe creates a little bit of irritation because they want to be very in pitch, So I tried that, and I was very desperate that we can work in the same room, but then they just right before the recording I couldn't travel to London because I couldn't go there, so I arranged already before the recording like a second opportunity, because I was once right at the beginning of the lockdown I was recording a score for The Old Guard, Netflix film, and I had to, we also wanted to record at Abbey Road at that time. And then we had to record in Iceland and build a whole medicine, routine for all the players and all that. And it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So I was a little bit educated by that one. So that when this score came, I was a little bit more relaxed. There was not so much tension.
And Nathan?
I mean, thankfully for me, it just happened to fall that when we recorded this, Abbey Road had sort of eased their restrictions. So this was the first score since all the lockdowns happened where we all got to be together in the same room. I was there. And yeah, it's there. I mean, we've figured out ways to make it work when it's not that, but clearly there's nothing like doing it all together in the same room. So I was really thankful that it worked out that way for Glass Onion.
And a final question for the group here. I'm curious, what would you say was your big break in Hollywood? Like what project was maybe your first job or something that you felt really like you had accomplished something in your career? And separate, do you have any advice for any up and coming composers out there? Any words of wisdom for them? Nathan, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question, and I think that honestly, and it's easy for us to say this looking back. It's really difficult to do this when you're at the beginning. There's a sense of it's all about who you know, right? And I think that is true, except it's not true in the way we traditionally understand that phrase. It's true in a literal way, meaning it is all about who you know right now. So Ryan and I grew up working together. He wrote Brick right out of college and took 7 years to try to get that made. we didn't have any connections in Hollywood. He finally passed the hat to friends and family and figured out what's the cheapest we could make this movie for. And at that point, he hired me because he didn't have enough money to hire a real composer. And so it was, it's like I was doing this project for Ryan, and here we're like looking back and it's like, yeah, you were working for like one of the biggest directors in Hollywood, but at that point it's like you're really just working with your friends. And I think that that's so important for a starting composer. It's like, it's all about who you know. How do I get to know someone that I think is important right now? And that's that's the wrong way to approach it. It is about, who do you know that's making a DIY movie in their dorm room? Who do you know that is helping someone else on an orchestral project? Those are the places to start working, I think. And hopefully if you are good to work with, and if you write something that somebody likes, then people say like, oh, let's work with that person again. It's very much a growing thing that starts from immediately right around you, I think.
And Volker, how about you?
Well, when I was till 2000. Well, still I'm a performing artist, and I'm doing a lot of concerts in the year. And when I was playing in Melbourne in 2016, Garth Davis, the director of Lion, came to me after the concert, and he said, "I really love how your sounds are on the prepared piano. I would love to have you for the first half of Lion." As a composer, and that was for me, in a way, I would say, the first time that somebody asked me to work on his film, and I was really thrilled by that. And I had to learn from scratch. I had no idea what a cue sheet is at that time. I have a lot of instruments here, but mostly all the instruments are for my records at that time. And then I would say, by seeing that and looking backwards, I have to say it's always important that you work and work and work in all sorts of different situations, and prepare yourself when the luck is knocking on your door, that you are relaxed and that you're not like, because I think you can prepare yourself by just thinking big in a way, and preparing yourself that when someday somebody calls you, that you're able to actually fulfill the job. And I think that's what I'm doing right now as well. I'm trying to figure out where I want to be next, and then I'm preparing myself that once the situation will come, that I'm not struggling.
And how about you, Simon?
Well, I come from a slightly different world, in that I was like one of several other composers. I was a session musician for many, many years. And so I was lucky. I got to work with lots of my heroes. I was here in Los Angeles. And, my first film I ever worked on was Dancing with Wolves with John Barry, and those sort of things. But I sort of like made a choice. I liked working at the very top level. And so it was very difficult for me to accept some of the films I was being offered as a composer, which were, say, you have something that is the sort of thing you get as a start as a composer, when you're getting offered something that is a major film that's out there. But I would say that the one advantage of that is that I had this huge library of books that I sort of assembled as I worked, because I also have the curiosity gene. I think something that Volker talked about, which is I think we all have. I think Nathan, I'm sure the same thing, is part of what we like, is that idea of doing lots of different things. And in terms of advice I would give to people, I think the answer, first of all, is to say yes to everything, because you never know where the path may lead. There are any number of times where you say yes to something that is microscopically small, that you don't think is worth anything, but then you discover that man or woman is suddenly become, she or he is doing this film over here, and they remember what you did, and would you like to work on this? And I think that would be the key, is it's yes. It's yes to everything until you can get to a point of saying no.
Well, thank you all. This was so enlightening. I can't wait to rewatch your movies now with all of this, these new information that I have about all of your beautiful scores. Best of luck at the award shows coming up, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Marcus.
Thanks very much indeed.